If you're a business owner with stubborn belly fat that just isn't moving, there's something deeper at play. The things that you're trying to do right now to lose that belly fat don't work the same way for a lifestyle that's full of stress and pressure. And it's likely that you're training a bit more, or trying to eat a bit better, even tightening things up for a week or two, but none of it really compounds into results that you can trust. So instinctively, what do you try to do? You try to push more, you try to diet harder, become stricter with your lifestyle. And that's often where things go wrong. That's where things stall. And here's what I want to do for you in this video. First, I want to explain why your stubborn belly fat behaves the way it does once stress and responsibility go up. Then I'll show you the usual fixes that actually make it harder to shift. And finally, I'll walk you through a few things that can reliably move and remove this kind of fat without turning it into a guessing game in a way that's practical for you. My name is Sri-Ramesh. I'm a health and performance coach, and I work with business owners, entrepreneurs, executives at organizations, men that are operating at a high capacity to help them optimize and elevate their health. First, I want to give you a quick filter. And if this applies to you, the rest of this video will click. What makes this whole fat loss and stubborn belly fat aspect frustrating for you is that it feels like you're doing what should typically work. You're not starting from zero necessarily. You're not ignoring your health, but the harder you push, the less predictable the outcome. And that's the clue. When effort stops landing, your problem is not a result of added effort. And this is where we move from basic fat loss to a much more stubborn version, which requires you to operate in a different way completely. Think about it this way. If your waist is 37 inches or more, or it's been creeping up year on year, and even though you're trying to be more intentional with the way you exercise and eat, you're probably not dealing with the same fat loss problem you had earlier on in life. And this is the part that most men miss when they try to lose a stubborn belly fat. Dieting harder and stricter diets and stacking more workouts onto an already full week as you operate as a business owner, it often makes that belly fat more stubborn to get rid of. And that's why you need to operate with a different model. So let me show you what the old model is and how that keeps people stuck, and the new model that actually explains what's going on. Let's look at the screen here, and this is the old model. And this is what fat loss used to be like. The way you get rid of it's through more effort. If the fat isn't coming off, you tighten execution, you eat less, you move more, try harder. It's just a case of grafting and grinding more. And that model works. It works in simple environments. But the truth is, if you're a business owner or if you're a man operating in a high capacity, there's a new model which starts to matter once stress and responsibility rises. And that's the case if you don't live a neutral lifestyle. If you're a man operating a business, if you are dealing with high stress weeks and you have many things going off at the same time, your body doesn't respond the way it used to. And your body ends up responding to signals like stress, sleep, and inflammation. And it handles energy under load in a different fashion. And that's why getting rid of stubborn belly fat feels different, because at this point, it often is different. So now I'm going to name what this fat actually is and why it matters beyond just looking good and beyond aesthetics. What it is, it's visceral fat. And if we can break down fat, there's visceral fat and there's subcutaneous fat. Now, subcutaneous fat is the fat that's on the surface. It's the fat that you can pinch. But visceral fat, it's much more sinister in that it sits inside the abdominal cavity and it wraps around your organs like your liver, your pancreas, your intestines, and it's metabolically active. It can cause inflammation. It can cause a whole host of issues. Releasing inflammatory signals, it interferes with insulin sensitivity and thereby increases your chance of diabetes, and it affects how your liver processes glucose and fat. And this is why you can have two men side by side. Both of them can weigh the same, but one has much worse metabolic health because this is the fat that sits inside. You can't see it, which makes it all the more sinister. And if you're a man that's operating at an elite level, at a high capacity, and with a lifestyle that's full of stresses, you're paying a very specific cost when you have this kind of visceral fat. It goes beyond just a health concept. It shows up as a performance drag in your day-to-day life. It can affect things like more energy swings, more afternoon crashes, worsening sleep quality, and slower recovering overall from training and stress. Your ability to bounce back is severely hindered. So now let's talk about why the obvious fixes for fat loss backfire here. And then I'll give you a few practical levers that can actually help you alleviate this. When something resists in life, as men, we default to more output. When it comes to fitness and training, it's always about how can we push more, give more, train harder. If it's about trying to lose weight, we're trying to restrict ourselves more, cut harder. But if you're a man that's already under significant stress and you're under recovered, that's like trying to scale a business by just working more hours. You're working hard at the wrong thing and it's not necessarily pulling the right levers. As a man, if your sleep is already inconsistent, dieting aggressively will only amplify your stress hormones and cravings further. And if your training volume keeps climbing, your recovery erodes. So you end up in this loop of you push harder, your recovery gets worse, the body gets much more conservative, and the belly becomes a place where it doesn't negotiate. It's purely because of the way you live your life. And I've seen this pattern constantly, consistently across men who are founders, who are operators and entrepreneurs. They operate in such a way where their body doesn't want to give up any more fat because it's already in that highly stressed, under recovered state. So, what actually works? I've talked about a bunch of reasons why traditional ways don't work when it comes to fat loss, but there are 4 broad buckets that reliably move visceral fat. And they're a lot more concrete than me telling you just to relax from your already busy lifestyle. So, starting with the first one, it's about building the engine. And this is all to do with lifting weights. But how do you do it? Lifting weights is one of the most reliable tools for reducing visceral fat over time because building lean muscle changes your whole system. That's why I call it building the engine. At a high level, we want to incorporate around 2 to 4 resistance training sessions a week consistently. 2 to 4, that's all you need. People that talk about being in the gym 5 to 7 days a week don't know what they're talking about. 2 to 4 times consistently will give you the progress that you need. Prioritizing the big patterns here is also very key. And that means pushing, pulls, carries, squats. Progress this over time. You want to ensure that the weight is progressing over time because this is how you reliably build strength. And as a byproduct of that, you're building muscle mass. I don't want you to turn this into a cardio session where you're trying to pump and have very short breaks in between your exercises in that it turns into some cardio session. The goal here is to build strength and muscle over time. This is your biggest lever. And the reason why is because lean muscle improves insulin handling. It's a sink. It allows you to absorb glucose much more efficiently. And it also makes it harder for visceral fat to accumulate in the first place. And that's key here. But if you have limited time, there's a second training tool which I use with my clients that can work quite well, as long as you don't use it in the wrong way, which I'll get into. High intensity interval training or HIIT workouts, they can be quite effective for visceral fat, especially for a man that's time poor, that doesn't have as much time to spend in the gym, because it delivers a strong metabolic signal in less time. And the sessions can be short, they're highly intense, and they're very effective when it comes to getting rid of or reducing visceral fat. The caveat is if you're layering high intensity interval training or HIIT workouts on top of poor sleep and high stress, this can often backfire by deepening your recovery debt. So for someone already under high stress, low intensity steady state cardio may be your best tool. And I used it recently with a client I've worked with. He's a manager at a bank and he's got his newborn baby and couldn't spend enough time training and keeping himself in good shape. And he was telling me about how he wanted to go on more runs to lose the fat. And that's when I introduced him to LISS cardio. With LISS cardio, it burns more fat with a much lower physiological strain than doing a HIIT workout. But research shows that steady aerobic training and HIIT can reduce fat. But LISS is much more gentle on the system and easier to recover from, while still supporting visceral fat loss. And the way it works is, it uses fat as a fuel when you're engaging in that mode of workout. Typically, I would prescribe around 3 to 5 LISS sessions a week, roughly around 30 minutes to 60 minutes each. And that is meaningful for fat loss over time. But training is only one side. The next 2 buckets are why some men train hard and still can't seem to shift the waist. And a big one here is around stress downregulation. Chronic stress pushes visceral fat through cortisol and appetite signaling. And this isn't me asking you to become some Zen monk. It's about having one reliable off switch in your day. Things like a daily walk without calls, incredibly important for your nervous system. 5 to 10 minutes of breathing or stillness that actually drops your heart rate. And these are things that compound over time. A much underappreciated thing is just not stacking stimulants late in the day. Having a good cutoff time for when you have your last cup of coffee can be very meaningful for reducing stress in the long run. So if your nervous system never comes down, fat loss becomes an uphill battle regardless of your training. And finally, nutrition is key. And it's not about perfect dieting at all. And it's not what I'm trying to prescribe, but specific nutrition targets that can reduce visceral fat and pressure. So this is the last bucket I want to get into, and it's targeted nutrition. It's a mix of having protein and soluble fiber that will remove landmines, and landmines are what I refer to as highly processed food and refined sugar. And it doesn't require you having some fancy diet label. You just need a few consistent targets. So hitting protein consistently is always my go-to. It's important because it supports your muscle growth, supports muscle maintenance, and it's highly satiating, so it helps with appetite control. So that should be the anchor for your meals, having a good protein anchor. And I typically go for about 30 to 40 grams of protein per meal. I want you to increase your soluble fiber as well, because that helps your appetite, as well as your glucose regulation. A few examples would be flax, chia seeds, oats, legumes, sweet potato, highly underrated, and some fruit. They're very key when it comes to fiber. I'd say apples are a great one. Apples are really great for keeping you fuller for longer and reducing the landmines like excessive added sugar, frequent ultra-processed snacks, and high saturated fat intake combined with low fiber. That's a no-go. That's something we want to avoid. And overall, this is about stabilizing your energy and appetite so your body isn't in this constant volatile cycle. Now, here's the key. You don't need to do all of this perfectly, but you do need to know which one is currently the bottleneck for you. So to reiterate, you don't burn visceral fat by forcing harder effort. You reduce it by changing the signals that tell your body whether to store the fat centrally or not. Most men make this mistake of guessing which lever matters most for them. So here's one simple thing I want you to do this week going forwards. For the next 7 days, I don't want you to change everything. What I want you to do is start with one low intensity, steady state cardio session. And this is how I want you to do it. Get on a treadmill, get it on the highest incline you can, and at a walking pace, at a pace you can still keep conversation without huffing and puffing, 30 to 40 minutes of that. If you can manage it twice this week, great, even better. But this will be one of your key tools for fat loss over time. Doing this alone will have a great and significant impact in your health. So if you're sedentary and you're eating chaotically, you don't need this level of nuance yet, but you do need the basics. But if you're a man who's building and operating a business and you're trying to be intentional and the belly is this one area that just doesn't respond effectively, this is the situation you're in. And the longer this pattern runs, the more your body treats it as normal. And that's when health issues start to compound and seemingly come out of nowhere. So it's not about what diet you should follow, but it's more so understanding what is my body responding to right now and what do I need to fix first out of these levers. And very key here, and the last thing I'll say on this, but if you want to be accurate and evidence-based when it comes to understanding how much visceral fat you have in your body, go for a DEXA scan. They are by far one of the most accurate ways to measure your body composition, your lean muscle mass, and how much visceral fat you have in your body. And it's a very key diagnosis. And that's something I do. I do that with my clients as well. That's the base of the work that we do together. And if you want help identifying your bottleneck and sequencing that right approach, that's what I do. That's what I do with my clients. But otherwise, thanks for watching this video. If you do have any questions, please drop them in the comments. Otherwise, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.